Hello beauties, how are you all doing? My name is Shaz and I love colorful makeup. Today I'm going to tell you about 17 palettes that I found in my collection that I can't wait to use this summer. If that sounds good to you, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more content like this. Let's go into the video. Okay beauties, I do want to mention that I did this eye look with one of the palettes, and when we get to the palette I'll tell you all. Quick mention that there's no ranking here. These are just randomly ordered. Some of these palettes are going to be available, some of them are no longer available, but maybe you have it in your collection already. Let's get to it. The first one I want to talk about, beauties, is Kaleidos's Escape Pod. Beauties, I purchased this palette quite a while ago, I think a couple of years ago, so this palette is not new, but I think Kaleidos has redone the packaging. I think this holographic purple no longer exists. It's like a gray color nowadays, but this color story is ideal for the summer. Let's talk quickly about what I consider a summery palette. When I'm thinking about summer, I'm thinking about either pastels or bright colors. Now, you all know, if you've been watching my channel, that I'm not the biggest pastel lover just because I have very dark features. I know you were surprised to hear that, but I have very dark features, so if I use pastel colors only on my eyes, it's going to totally wash me out, which is why I always like to combine it with colors that are very pigmented and have a huge amount of payoff, which then brings me to bright colors like these, and this palette is ideal for that kind of look. Yep, can't wait to use this palette this summer. Palette number 16 was released recently. I just checked on the brand's website and it's still available. You can still purchase it, but I think this might be the last restock. And that is no other than Planet Spirit from Odin's Eye. This palette was done in collaboration with Betty Jean, and just looking at the palette, you all know why I'm excited about this. All of these super bright colors just remind me of the summer. I can't wait to use this more often. Also beauties, I have a video dedicated to this collection, the Planet, what was the name? Perfect World collection, that I'll tag below. In that video, I swatch this palette. I also do an eye look with it. If y'all are curious, I can do more eye looks with it. And as I mentioned, the palette is still available if you're interested. Also beauties, before I continue, I tried not to repeat any brands because I don't want to use, 17 palettes from one brand. That just makes no sense. So I try to only pick one palette per brand that I'm very excited about. And the next palette that I want to talk about is from a brand that has 200,000 releases. And yes, that is no other than ColourPop. And this is their Sailor Moon palette. This palette and the whole collection I bought a while ago. I was a Sailor Moon fan when I was younger, which is why I purchased this whole collection, although this kind of color story is not really for me. This kind of color story is for someone with not such dark features, because these colors don't show up on me very well. But the colors are pretty vibrant and summery. So I'm looking forward to using this palette, only that I might have to combine it with a palette that has some darker colors. But if you have light features, these colors might look really good on you. Palette number 14, beauties, is Bard from Fantasy Cosmetica. This palette, beauties, just gives me the sunshine and warmth vibe, and I would love to use this palette in the summer. Even the blue colors really remind me of the ocean. This just reminds me of being in near the ocean or at a beach, this foamy, sea foamy green color, and the red, the orange, the warm colors. Love this palette. I do have a video dedicated to this palette. I'll mark it below. Yeah, can't wait to use this palette more often. Palette number 13, beauties, even has summer in the name. It's literally the epitome of summer, beach vibes, being kind of carefree. Love all of that. Can you guess? That's no other than Cool Summer from It's Belle Cosmetics. This palette is still available for purchase on It's Belle website. I'm pretty sure all of the palettes I've mentioned so far are still available, including this one if you want to purchase them. But just look at the color story. It's super, super summer and carefree vibes. Frankly, I was waiting for the summer to come to use this palette. I know the brand also offers these colors as singles if that's what you're interested in. Beauties, the next palette I want to talk about might have also made it to my spring listing of palettes, but you all know you can use the same palette in spring and summer. A palette can have more than one season vibe for you. And that is Blooming palette from Mika's Beauty Shop. This palette is so colorful with all of these pops of colors. It reminds me of flowers, and I can't wait to use these colors on my eyes during the summer. As I mentioned, pops of colors just remind me of summer, so definitely can't wait to use more of this. And palette number 11, friends, also I believe was in my Springs listing. What can I do? It has a lot of pops of colors and it reminds me of both seasons. Can you guess which one it is? It is Nomads Monteverde. Let me quickly explain that the reason this reminded me of spring was all the green colors. It reminds me so much of nature. And the reason it reminds me of summer is all the pops of colors. I can't wait to use more of this palette this season. Beauties, this palette is also available as singles if you're interested in just purchasing some of the colors to test. Palette number 10, Beauties, is a palette that you're going to need as a companion palette to another palette because it's an all shimmer palette. But I didn't want to discriminate because this palette totally gives me the summer vibes. And that is Looking for Rainbows from Gloss Gods. Can you guess why this palette made it to this listing? I mean, these beautiful colors, and we all know Gloss Gods does all kinds of shimmery, shifty goodness. I'm doing this so that you can see some of the shifts at least. This palette is gorgeous, and I think you all can see some of the blue shifts. These kinds of blues that are super vibrant remind me of the ocean, and they always make me feel kind of summery. The blues that remind me of winter, I think I did have a video about the wintry palettes, I'll link it down below if you're curious, are a little bit more cool toned than these kinds of blues. Yeah, these are more seafoam type blues, particularly this color. And this one actually is a purpley blue. I think you can see both of the shifts. And then you have all of these sort of lighter warm colors in here, and the pops of colors like this pink. Totally gives me the summer vibe, Beauties. Can't wait to combine this with some of the other palettes I mentioned that have a lot of colorful mattes to make eye looks for the summer. Palette number 9, friends, is also a palette that you would probably need to combine it with another palette, unless, unlike me, you love doing all shimmer looks or one eyeshadow look. Can you guess which one that is? Yes, Beauties, it is Dragon Fruit palette from Clionadh. This palette is so vibrant in its color story that it was kind of unfair to not be put in this ranking, because if I were to pick one season this palette reminds me of, it is the summer. All of these magentas and pinks and purple and, you know, the greens. Totally a summer palette. Also, this palette has some very interesting color shifts. After all, it is a Clionadh palette, and we all know Clionadh has the best shimmers and the best multichromes in the market. This color, Dragon Teeny, which kind of is a multichrome of pink to green to gold and blue and all kinds of shimmers. Yeah, some beautiful colors in this palette. I also love this lavender color out here called Infusion. Totally beautiful color. And this green is absolutely gorgeous. Of course, as I mentioned with Look for Rainbows, I would have to combine this with another palette that has mattes. And in my head, I'm already thinking about some of the palettes we either mentioned or we are going to mention in this listing. But if you like one shadow looks or all shimmer looks, you can also just do that with this palette. Palette number 8, Beauties, was a recent release and it also is still available. In fact, every single palette I mentioned should still be available, but this palette I'm so excited about. And there is a video that I've done with this palette that I will tag in the comments box below. I've done swatches and eye looks already for you all. And that is Citrus Punch from Simply Posh. Do I even need to talk about why this palette reminds me of the summer? This palette's gorgeous and all vibrant and super, super, super bright. Everything that reminds me of summer. And it also reminds me of delicious fruits and cool drinks like lemonade, like punch, and different kinds of things in the summer. Friends, the next palette I want to talk about is not a recent release, but it is still available. And honestly, this is probably the prime palette that when I think of the summer, I think of. And that is Ice Cream Dream from Glamlight. This was my first Glamlight purchase, and I purchased it because of all of these super bright, fun, and summery colors. I mean, you can imagine why I consider this palette a summery palette based on everything I mentioned. You have the pastel colors up here, and then you have the bright colors down here. I don't think I've given this palette the love that it deserves, and I'm looking forward to using it more often this summer. Beauties, the next palette I want to talk about is a palette that surprised me the most last year. If you follow my channel, you should already be able to guess that. It is Paletopoly from Ace Beauty. I expect to not have to say anything about why this palette reminds me of summer based on everything else I said earlier in this video. You have the bright colors, you have the warm colors, again, bright colors. Yep, super summery. You can make super bright looks with this in the summer, super colorful with the blue, with the purple, with the yellow, with the super neon pink out here. Or you can do very warm eye looks using these colors, which are also eye looks that remind me of the summer. Palette number 5, friends, is another oldie but a goodie, and I know it is still available. Also, you can get your hands on it at TJ Maxx. I've seen it on sale pretty frequently at TJ Maxx. And that is BH Cosmetics' Summer in Saint-Tropez. I could not do this video without talking about this palette. I have the palette with the old packaging because I bought it eons ago. I expect to not have to talk about why this palette is a summer palette because it even has summer in the name. But just in case you're wondering, you know, you have all of these pops of colors as well as these warm colors. So you can make super pop of color eye looks, which are super representative of the summer, or you can make very warm eye looks, which are also representatives of the summer, similar to the eye look I have on. Also, beauties, this palette was pretty innovative for its time. You're gonna get 2 sort of duochrome colors, which for a palette that's like 4 years old or 3 years old, that is pretty good. If you find that TJ Maxx untouched, I highly recommend it for the summer. Friends, I can't talk about the summer without talking about this next palette because although this is one of those gigantic palettes and you all know how allergic I am to gigantic palettes, this palette totally reminds me of the summer, and you're going to hear why in a second. And the palette is Say Hello from Kara Beauty. Okay, looking at the color story, you should know why this reminds me of the summer. And yes, I know this is kind of a rainbow palette, but the combination of all of these pop of colors up here with the pastel colors down there really reminds me of the summer. And this is the type of palette that every summer, when I'm thinking about what palette I want to bring out, this palette comes to mind. Beauties, this is another palette I also found and purchased from TJ Maxx. Now that we're talking about TJ Maxx, I have talked about things I purchased at TJ Maxx in this channel. I have a series that I've started on that. I will tag it below if you're interested. Palette number 3, friends, might be the first or possibly the only palette from this listing that is no longer available, but I had to talk about it because this palette is beautiful and it totally reminds me of the summer, and if you have it, bring it out and use it. This is such a summery palette, and that is Sunset Horizons from Beauty Bay. Beauties, this palette I did not want to purchase. I purchased in a sale because the colors are just kind of confusing. It's a little bit difficult to understand how to use these colors together. But after owning it, I realized how amazing this palette is. Friends, just look at these bright, vibrant colors. Even this bluey sort of ocean blue type of a color totally reminds me of the summer. You can do anything from smoky eyes maybe in the summer to something similar to the eye look that I'm wearing right now. I have used this palette in this channel and I know this palette is no longer available. However, Beauty Bay has recently released a limited edition palette. I don't remember the name of the palette. I'll link the palette and the name of the palette down below, that has similar kind of vibes. It's a mix of sort of reds and berries and yellows. I think it's called Sunset or Sunrise or something like that. I've talked about it in my to buy or not to buys. And if you purchase that palette, I'm guessing you can do more or less the same eye looks. Now it's going to be missing these colors. If you have this palette, I highly recommend using it in the summer, and I'm definitely going to do that myself. We're approaching the end, friends. Palette number 2 is Cosmic Brushes Royal Rose. Now, beauties, I think you can see why this palette is such a summer palette for me. All these pops of colors and the yellow colors, and you can definitely do a little bit of sort of a neutrally look similar to what I'm wearing using this palette, which is why this is such a summery palette for me. Now, Cosmic Brushes has announced that they're coming out with a new palette that is kind of pastel-y. It's going to be an amazing complement to the palettes they already have. I have already purchased that palette. Who knows? Maybe by the time this video is up, I already have it and I'm already using it, making videos for you all. I'm super excited, and that palette is also such a summery palette, and I can't wait to get it and use these two palettes together. Stay tuned for videos with that. Beauties, I know you're already wondering, what about the palette you made this eye look with? Yes, I was saving it for last, and that is no other than, drum roll, can you guess what's the first palette we're going to talk about? It's Culture 2 from Juvia's Place. Beauties, I purchased this palette very recently, and this is so summery. All the vibrant colors as well as the warm color story. You have all of these golds and the yellows, even the olive greens. This palette is gorgeous. I highly recommend it. I think it was $35 or $32 or something, and I think it's totally worth the price. All of the colors in it, the quality is amazing, as it is with Juvia's Place. Earlier in the video, I showed you a couple of palettes that are all shimmer. And as you can see, this palette has quite a bit of very colorful mattes, and I can already imagine that I'm going to use this palette to complement those palettes when making eye looks, because I'm not an all shimmer eye look person or a one shimmer eye look person. So yeah, I think this palette would go really well for that kind of application if you're looking for a palette like that. I'm so excited to have this palette. I purchased this from Ulta. You can also purchase it on the Juvia's Place website. Also, don't forget to use someone's code if you're purchasing any of these things. With that, we come to the end of this video. Write to me in the comments below, what palettes do you have that remind you of the summer? Or what kind of palettes remind you of the summer? What makes a palette a summery palette for you? Thank you so much, beauties, for being here with me. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and also subscribe to my channel if you're not subscribed already. Have a fantastic day, and until next time, bye.